The moment Victoria Sinclair watched her husband kiss another woman in front of 300 guests, she did not cry. She did not scream. She did not collapse. She did not give them the satisfaction of witnessing her destruction. Instead, she smiled. The Grand Monarch Hotel ballroom was drowning in golden light and expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic shadows across marble floors polished to mirror brightness. Waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne flutes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The annual Children's Hope Charity Gala was the event of the season, a place where billionaires wrote checks, politicians made promises, and everyone pretended to care about something other than power. Victoria had attended this gala for 7 consecutive years as the wife of Richard Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Holdings and one of the most influential men in the country. She had worn designer gowns, smiled for photographers, and played the role of devoted spouse with flawless precision. Tonight, she wore emerald silk that cascaded over her 8-month pregnant belly like a waterfall. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo. Her makeup was immaculate. Her diamond necklace, a gift from Richard on their 5th anniversary, caught the light with every breath. She looked like a queen, and she had walked into this ballroom knowing exactly what was about to happen. The woman's name was Alexis Monroe. Victoria had learned everything about her over the past 3 months. 29 years old, former model, currently employed as Richard's executive assistant, a position that apparently included duties far beyond scheduling meetings and answering phones. Alexis was beautiful in the way weapons are beautiful, sharp, dangerous, designed to inflict damage. She had legs that went on forever, lips painted arterial red, and eyes that sparkled with calculated ambition. She had spent the past year and a half infiltrating Richard's life, his bed, and his bank accounts. And tonight, she had decided to claim her prize publicly. Victoria watched from across the ballroom as Alexis approached Richard near the champagne fountain. She watched as Alexis placed a perfectly manicured hand on Richard's chest. She watched as Richard's expression flickered, surprise, then something darker, hungrier, before Alexis pulled him into a kiss that lasted exactly 7 seconds. 7 seconds that were meant to end Victoria's world. The room went silent. 300 faces turned toward the spectacle. Mouths agape, champagne forgotten, phones rising to capture the scandal. Victoria could feel their eyes sliding toward her, waiting for the breakdown, anticipating the tears, hungry for the drama that would fuel gossip columns for months. Poor Victoria Sinclair, humiliated at her own charity event, betrayed by her husband, destroyed by a younger, prettier woman. That was the story they expected. That was not the story they would get. Victoria set down her sparkling water with deliberate calm. She smoothed the front of her emerald gown. She touched her pregnant belly, a gesture that looked maternal but was actually a signal. Across the room, 3 people noticed and began to move. Richard finally pulled away from Alexis, his face flushed with a combination of arousal and alarm. His eyes found Victoria through the crowd, and for the first time all evening, she saw fear flicker behind his carefully constructed confidence. Good. He should be afraid. Alexis, meanwhile, was glowing with triumph. She kept her hand on Richard's arm, possessive, territorial, and turned to face Victoria with a smile that dripped venom. "Oh dear," Alexis said, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I hope that wasn't too shocking for you, Mrs. Sinclair. In your delicate condition, you really should avoid stress." The crowd held its breath. Victoria walked toward them slowly, her heels clicking against the marble with the steady rhythm of a countdown. Each step brought her closer to the confrontation everyone was expecting, the tears, the accusations, the public breakdown of a woman scorned. But Victoria Sinclair had not survived 34 years of life, 12 years of marriage to a narcissist, and 3 months of meticulous planning just to crumble at the finish line. She stopped 3 feet from her husband and his mistress. She looked at Alexis with an expression of such serene composure that the younger woman's smile faltered. "Actually," Victoria said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "I should thank you, Miss Monroe." Alexis blinked. "Excuse me?" "For the kiss. For the public display. For making absolutely certain that every person in this room, and every camera recording this moment, has witnessed exactly who my husband really is." She turned to face the crowd, her hand resting on her belly, her posture radiating a power that had nothing to do with diamonds or designer gowns. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption to your evening, but I'm afraid the real show is just beginning. Victoria reached in her clutch and pulled out a small remote control. Behind her, the massive projection screens that had been displaying the charity's logo flickered and changed. And what appeared on those screens made 300 guests gasp in unison. Richard's face went white. Alexis's smile died completely. And Victoria Sinclair finally allowed herself to feel the satisfaction she had been suppressing for 97 days. The trap had been sprung. Now came the reckoning. If you think you know what happens next, you are wrong. Stay close. Keep watching. Because the wife they thought was weak is about to teach everyone in that room what real power looks like. Victoria Chun had learned to wear masks long before she became Victoria Sinclair. Growing up in San Francisco's Chinatown, she was the daughter of immigrants who ran a small restaurant that never quite made enough to cover the bills. Her father worked 18-hour days. Her mother aged 20 years and 10. And Victoria watched them sacrifice everything, their health, their dreams, their youth, for a future they would never live to see. Her father died of a heart attack when she was 16, collapsing in the kitchen he had never been able to afford to renovate. Her mother followed 3 years later, worn down by grief and exhaustion until her body simply stopped fighting. Victoria buried them both before her 20th birthday. She had inherited nothing but debt and a burning determination to never be powerless again. She put herself through college on scholarships and waitressing jobs, graduating with honors in business administration. She clawed her way into an entry-level position at a marketing firm, then another, each step climbing higher, each rung bringing her closer to the life she had promised herself. By 22, she was managing accounts worth millions. By 25, she was running her own department. By 27, she had caught the attention of Richard Sinclair at an industry conference, and everything changed. Richard was 15 years older, devastatingly charming, and possessed the kind of wealth that Victoria had only ever seen in magazines. He pursued her with the intensity of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted: flowers, dinners, weekend trips to Paris, promises of a future she had never dared to imagine. She should have seen the warning signs, the way he needed to control every aspect of their dates, the subtle criticisms disguised as compliments, the possessiveness that masqueraded as passion. But Victoria was 27 and exhausted from fighting alone. She wanted someone to share the burden. She wanted security. She wanted to believe that love could be as simple as saying yes. They married 6 months after meeting. The fairy tale lasted approximately 18 months. The first time Richard hit her, they had been married for 2 years. It was a slap, quick, sharp, delivered in their bedroom after she had questioned his decision to fire her from the marketing position she had earned. He had insisted she did not need to work, that her job was to support him, that a wife of Richard Sinclair did not lower herself to corporate drudgery. She had argued. He had responded. Afterward, he had cried and apologized and promised it would never happen again. He bought her the diamond necklace she wore tonight, and Victoria had done what so many women before her had done. She had believed him. It happened again, and again, and again. Never the face. Richard was too smart for that. Always places the gowns would cover. Always followed by gifts and tears and promises that grew emptier each time. Victoria learned to be smaller, quieter, to anticipate his moods and navigate his temper like a sailor reading storms. She learned that survival sometimes meant surrender, and that the prison of a mansion could be as suffocating as any cell. She had tried to leave once, 5 years into the marriage. Richard had found her at the airport, ticket in hand, suitcase packed. He had smiled that charming smile and spoken in that reasonable voice, and then he had explained, calmly, precisely, exactly what would happen if she ever tried to leave again. He would destroy her reputation. He would use his connections to ensure she never worked again. He would take everything she had helped him build and leave her with nothing but the clothes on her back. And she had believed him, because Richard Sinclair did not make idle threats. The pregnancy changed everything. Victoria had never planned to have children with Richard. She had been secretly taking birth control for years, hiding the pills in a compartment of her jewelry box that he never checked. But nothing was perfect, and life had a cruel sense of humor. When the test came back positive, Victoria's first emotion was not joy. It was terror. A child meant permanence. A child meant another life, trapped in Richard's orbit. A child meant she could never truly escape. But as the weeks passed and the life inside her grew, something shifted. Victoria began to feel something she had not experienced in years. Hope. This child would not grow up the way she had, struggling, powerless, invisible. This child would have every advantage, every opportunity, every door thrown open before them. And Victoria would burn the entire world down to make sure of it. The discovery of Alexis Monroe came 3 months before the gala. Victoria had been organizing Richard's home office, a task he usually forbade, but had forgotten to lock the door that day, when she found the second phone. It was hidden in a drawer beneath a false bottom, the kind of hiding place that spoke of long practice and careful planning. The messages were explicit. The photographs were worse. And the bank transfers, regular payments to an account in Alexis's name, told Victoria everything she needed to know about the nature of their relationship. Her husband was not just having an affair. He was planning to replace her. A smarter woman might have confronted him. A weaker woman might have crumbled. Victoria did neither. Instead, she called the one person she had kept hidden from Richard for 12 years of marriage, her college roommate, now a divorce attorney named Diane Foster, who specialized in high-asset cases with dangerous spouses. Diane listened to everything. Then she said 5 words that changed Victoria's life. "We are going to destroy him." Diane Foster operated out a modest office in downtown Los Angeles, deliberately unremarkable from the outside. No flashy signage, no luxury furnishings, just a plain door with a simple nameplate that read Foster Legal Services. It was intentional, Diane had explained during their first meeting. Her clients were often women fleeing powerful men, women who needed discretion more than they needed marble lobbies and expensive art. Victoria arrived at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, having told Richard she was attending a prenatal yoga class. She had been telling him a lot of lies lately. Each one felt like a small victory. Diane was waiting in her office, files already spread across her desk. She was a striking woman in her late 30s, with sharp cheekbones, natural gray streaks in her dark hair that she refused to dye, and eyes that missed nothing. She had built her career on cases that other lawyers refused to touch. Cases involving abuse, hidden assets, and men who believed themselves untouchable. Richard Sinclair was about to learn how wrong that belief could be. "Sit down," Diane said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "We have a lot to cover." Victoria lowered herself carefully, one hand supporting her growing belly. At 5 months pregnant, she was past the point of hiding her condition, though she had become expert at hiding everything else. "Did you bring the phone?" Victoria reached into her purse and produced the burner device she had found in Richard's office. She had photographed everything on it before returning it to its hiding place, then transferred the images to a secure cloud account that Diane had helped her create. "The messages go back 18 months, Victoria said. "He met Alexis at a conference in Miami. She was working as a promotional model for one of the vendors." Diane scrolled through the photographs, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp. "And the payments?" "Monthly transfers to an account in her name. $20,000 like clockwork, plus a condo in her name purchased 6 months ago. And jewelry, clothing, travel expenses, all documented." "Smart girl." Diane set down the phone. "Most mistresses leave no paper trail. This one is greedy. She thinks she is going to replace me," Victoria said quietly. "There are messages discussing it. Richard has promised her that once the baby is born and he has an heir, he will divorce me and marry her." The words tasted like poison in her mouth. An heir, as if her child were nothing more than a business asset, a checkbox on Richard's list of accomplishments. "He is in for a surprise," Diane replied. "California is a community property state. Everything acquired during your marriage is subject to division. And I mean everything. His company, his investments, his real estate holdings. Without a prenuptial agreement. There was no prenup," Victoria confirmed. "Richard was too arrogant to think he would ever need one." Diane smiled, the kind of smile that made Victoria understand why powerful men feared this woman. "Then we have significant leverage. But leverage alone is not enough. We need to build an airtight case, document the abuse, the infidelity, the financial deception. We need evidence that cannot be disputed, dismissed, or buried by his legal team. How do we get that? Diane leaned back in her chair. I have someone I want you to meet. He is the best in the business at finding what powerful men try to hide. She pressed a button on her desk phone. Send him in. The office door opened, and Victoria turned to see a man she had never expected to see again. His name was Marcus Chun, no relation to Victoria, despite the shared surname. A coincidence that had been the source of jokes when they first met 15 years ago at a college party. He had been a criminal justice major with a crooked smile and an idealistic belief that he could change the world. She had been a wide-eyed freshman trying to figure out who she wanted to become. They had dated for one semester, a brief, intense romance that burned bright and faded fast when life pulled them in different directions. He had gone to the FBI Academy. She had gone into marketing. They had lost touch the way young people do, absorbed by careers and ambitions and the relentless forward motion of time. And now he was standing in Diane's office, looking at her with an expression of genuine shock. Victoria. She stared at him, her mind struggling to reconcile the memory with the reality. He was broader now, his boyish features hardened into something more weathered and handsome. Gray touched his temples, lines bracketed his eyes. But those eyes, dark, intelligent, kind, were exactly the same. Marcus. The name felt strange on her tongue. I did not know you were Diane's client. He looked at the attorney. You did not mention. I mentioned nothing because I needed you both focused, Diane interrupted. Personal history is irrelevant. What matters is that Marcus is the best private investigator on the West Coast, and Victoria needs the best. You can have your reunion later. Right now, we work. Marcus hesitated, his eyes still fixed on Victoria, on her pregnant belly, her tired eyes, the shadow of something broken behind her careful composure. Then he nodded and took the seat beside her. Tell me everything, he said quietly. From beginning, Victoria talked for 2 hours. She told him about the courtship that had swept her off her feet, the marriage that had slowly become a prison, the first slap that had shattered her illusions, and the countless blows that followed. She told him about the isolation Richard had engineered, cutting her off from friends, family, any support system that might give her strength to leave. She told him about the miscarriage she had suffered 4 years ago, a pregnancy she had desperately wanted, lost after Richard shoved her during an argument. He had called an accident. The doctors had believed him. Victoria had never spoken of it again until now. She told him about finding the burner phone and discovering Alexis Monroe, about realizing that Richard was planning to discard her like a used tissue once the baby was born, about the cold, calculated rage that had replaced her fear. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When she finally finished, silence hung between them like a held breath. I am sorry, he said at last. I'm sorry you went through this. I am sorry no one protected you. Victoria shook her head. I do not need apologies. I need evidence. Then that is what you will get. Marcus leaned forward, his professional demeanor clicking back into place. Richard Sinclair thinks he is untouchable because he has money and connections. But in my experience, men like him always leave trails. Hidden accounts, buried secrets, skeletons they think are safely locked away. He paused. I will find them. All of them. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. A tension she had been carrying for so long, she had forgotten it was there. There is something else, she said. Something that might help. She reached in her purse and pulled out a USB drive. What is this? Marcus asked. 3 years ago, Richard was involved in a deal that went wrong. A development project in Nevada that was supposed to be a partnership with a man named Thomas Whitfield. Whitfield invested $20 million, and then the project collapsed. Richard claimed it was market conditions, but Thomas never believed him. What happened to Whitfield? Victoria's jaw tightened. He died. Suicide, according to the official report. But his widow always believed Richard had something to do with it, that the project was a fraud, that Richard stole the money and drove Thomas to his death. Diane straightened in her chair. Why did you not mention this before? Because I did not have proof. Just rumors. Whispers I overheard at dinner parties. Victoria held up the USB drive. But last month, I found this in Richard's safe. I do not know what is on it. It is encrypted, but he keeps it hidden separately from everything else. Whatever is on here, he does not want anyone to find it. Marcus took the drive, carefully turning it over in his hands. I know someone who can break the encryption. It will take a few days, but if there is something incriminating on here, then we have more than just divorce leverage, Diane finished. We have criminal liability. For the first time since entering the office, Victoria allowed herself to feel something like hope. They met 3 more times over the following weeks, always in secret, always when Richard believed Victoria was somewhere safe and predictable. Marcus was thorough in a way that bordered on obsessive. He traced bank accounts through shell companies. He obtained security footage from hotels where Richard and Alexis had stayed together. He documented every lie Richard told about business trips that were actually romantic getaways. But the real breakthrough came from the encrypted USB drive. Victoria was sitting in Diane's office when Marcus arrived with the results, his expression unreadable, but his energy crackling with barely contained intensity. "You need to see this," he said, plugging the drive into Diane's computer. The files that appeared on the screen made Victoria's blood run cold. Emails, financial records, wire transfers, and a series of documents that proved beyond any doubt that Richard had deliberately defrauded Thomas Whitfield out of $20 million. But that was not the worst of it. There were also messages, communications between Richard and a man named Viktor Kozlov, whom Marcus identified as a known associate of organized crime figures. The messages discussed eliminating a problem. The problem was Thomas Whitfield. He did not commit suicide, Victoria whispered, staring at the screen. Richard had him killed. Not directly, Marcus said. But these messages suggest he paid Kozlov to make Whitfield's death look like suicide. The timing matches perfectly. The payment was made 3 days before Whitfield died. Diane stood from her desk, pacing the room with barely contained excitement. This is not just leverage for a divorce. This is evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. If we take this to the authorities, no. Victoria's voice was sharp, surprising even herself. Not yet. Both Marcus and Diane stared at her. "Victoria," Diane began, I know what it is." Victoria rose from her chair, her hand pressed against her belly where her daughter was kicking. "But if we go to the authorities now, Richard's lawyers will bury this in motions and appeals for years. He has connections everywhere. Police, prosecutors, judges. By the time anyone faces consequences, he will have hidden the money, destroyed evidence, and found a way to escape." "Then what do you suggest?" Marcus asked. Victoria turned to face them, and in her eyes was a fire that had been building for 12 years. "The Children's Hope Gala is in 3 weeks. Richard is receiving an award for his philanthropic contributions. The same man who had another human being murdered for money. Every powerful person in the city will be there. Every camera, every journalist." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I want to destroy him publicly. I want to expose everything. The affair, the fraud, the murder, in front of everyone who has ever admired him. I want to watch his empire collapse while the world watches. And then, when he has nothing left, when his reputation is ashes and his allies have abandoned him, then we give the evidence to the authorities." Diane exchanged a look with Marcus. "That is incredibly risky," Diane said. "If anything goes wrong, I have spent 12 years living with risk," Victoria interrupted. "I have spent 12 years being beaten, controlled, and treated like property. I am done being careful. I am done being afraid." She looked at Marcus, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared understanding, of wounds that never fully healed. "Help me," she said. "Help me end this on my terms." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly he nodded. "Tell me what you need." The 3 weeks leading up to the gala were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Victoria had never considered herself a strategist. For 12 years, her primary skill had been survival, reading Richard's moods, anticipating his violence, making herself small enough to avoid his wrath. But desperation, she discovered, was an excellent teacher. She learned to lie with perfect conviction. She smiled at Richard over breakfast, asked about his day, pretended to be excited about the gala and the award he would receive. She attended charity committee meetings and discussed flower arrangements and seating charts with women who had no idea they were planning the venue for their golden boy's destruction. She even made peace with Alexis Monroe. That had been the hardest part, watching the woman who was sleeping with her husband waltz into planning meetings with an air of smug superiority. Alexis had been hired as an event coordinator 3 months ago, a position Richard had arranged to keep his mistress close without raising suspicion. Victoria had smiled and welcomed her to the team. Alexis had smiled back, her eyes glittering with barely concealed contempt. It was a dance of pretense and poison, and Victoria was determined to lead. The planning sessions with Marcus and Diane happened in stolen moments. Late nights when Richard was traveling, early mornings before the house staff arrived, secret meetings in locations so mundane they would never attract attention. A coffee shop in Pasadena, a public library in Glendale, a park bench in a neighborhood where no one knew the Sinclair name. It was during one of these meetings that Victoria began to notice something shifting between her and Marcus. They were sitting in his car outside a grocery store in the valley, reviewing the technical details of how they would hijack the Gala's presentation system. Marcus had obtained credentials from a contact who worked for the hotel's AV department, a favor called in from his FBI days, and they had tested the system twice to ensure everything would work perfectly. But the conversation had drifted, as it often did, from strategy to something more personal. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" Marcus asked, staring through the windshield at the suburban landscape. "If we had not lost touch after college?" Victoria considered the question. She had thought about it more than she wanted to admit, especially lately, when Marcus's steady presence had become the anchor in her storm-tossed life. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I'm not sure it would have changed anything. I was so determined to prove myself, to build something from nothing. Richard represented everything I thought I wanted: security, status, a life my parents never had. And now I understand that security built on someone else's power is just another kind of prison." Marcus turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "You're not in prison anymore, Victoria. You're fighting back. That takes more courage than most people will ever understand." "I do not feel courageous. I feel terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear." He reached across the console and took her hand. "And you're the bravest person I know." His fingers were warm against hers, steady and strong. For a moment, Victoria allowed herself to lean into the comfort of human touch that was not designed to control or hurt her. Then she pulled away. "We should focus," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "The gala is in 12 days. Marcus nodded, but she could see the flicker of something in his expression, disappointment, perhaps, or understanding. He did not push. He never pushed. And that restraint, more than anything else, made Victoria trust him in ways she had not trusted anyone in years. The first complication arose 8 days before the gala. Victoria was reviewing the final guest list when she noticed a name that made her blood freeze. Victor Kozlov, the man Richard had allegedly paid to arrange Thomas Whitfield's murder, was attending the charity gala as a guest of one of the corporate sponsors. She called Marcus immediately. "He is going to be there," she said, her voice tight with fear. "Kozlov, he is on the guest list." There was a long pause before Marcus responded. "That is not ideal, but it does not change our plan." "Not ideal? Marcus, this man may have killed someone on Richard's orders. If he sees the evidence we are about to display, if he realizes what is happening, he will be focused on protecting himself, not attacking you. Men like Kozlov survive by cutting their losses and disappearing. The moment those screens light up with evidence of Richard's crimes, Kozlov will be heading for the nearest exit." Victoria wished she could share his confidence. "What if you are wrong? What if he tries to stop us?" "I will be there," Marcus said, his voice firm. "I will have people positioned throughout the ballroom. No one is going to hurt you, Victoria. I promise." She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But the fear that kept her alive for 12 years would not quiet so easily. The second complication was more personal. 6 days before the gala, Victoria's doctor informed her that her blood pressure was dangerously elevated. Stress, the doctor explained, was putting both her and the baby at risk. She needed a rest. She needed to avoid anxiety. She needed to take care of herself. Victoria nodded and smiled and promised to follow the doctor's orders. Then she went home and continued planning her husband's destruction. She knew the risks. She understood that what she was doing could harm not only herself but the child growing inside her, the daughter she had already named in her heart, though she had shared that name with no one. Hope. She was going to name her daughter Hope. It seemed fitting for a child who represented everything Victoria had stopped believing was possible. A future free from fear, a life built on truth instead of lies, a chance to be the mother her own mother had never had the opportunity to become. Hope was worth fighting for. Hope was worth risking everything. The third complication came from an unexpected source. 4 days before the gala, Victoria received a phone call from a number she did not recognize. Mrs. Sinclair? The voice was female, hesitant, familiar. Who is this? My name is Sarah Whitfield. I believe you know who my husband was. Victoria's heart stopped. Thomas Whitfield's widow. How did you get this number? A mutual friend. Someone who told me you might be interested in the truth about what happened to Thomas. Victoria moved to a private corner of the house, checking over her shoulder to ensure no one was listening. I'm listening. Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. I have spent 3 years trying to prove that my husband did not kill himself. Everyone told me I was crazy, that I was grieving, that I needed to accept reality and move on. But I knew Thomas. He would never have left me and our children like that. Never. What do you know about Richard's involvement? I know that they were partners. I know that Richard promised Thomas a guaranteed return on his investment. And I know that 2 weeks before Thomas died, he told me he had discovered something wrong with the project, something that made him afraid. Victoria's grip tightened on the phone. Did he tell you what he discovered? No. He said he needed proof before he could make accusations against someone as powerful as Richard Sinclair. He was gathering documents, meeting with a forensic accountant. Sarah paused, and then he was dead. The pieces were falling into place, a picture more damning than Victoria had imagined. Mrs. Whitfield, I have evidence. Documents that suggest Richard was involved in your husband's death. Silence. Then a sob. I knew it. I always knew. I'm planning to expose him publicly at the Children's Hope Gala. Everything, the fraud, the affair, the murder. But I need to know if you would be willing to participate. Participate how? Your testimony. Your story. The world needs to see not just what Richard did, but who he destroyed in the process. Would you be willing to share your truth? Another long pause. Victoria could hear Sarah breathing, could almost feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Yes, Sarah said finally. For Thomas. For my children. Yes. Victoria closed her eyes, relief and terror warring in her chest. Thank you. I will have my attorney contact you with details. She hung up and immediately called Marcus. We have another witness, she said. Sarah Whitfield is willing to testify. Marcus let out a breath. That changes the narrative completely. It is not just a scorned wife accusing her husband anymore. It is a pattern of destruction with multiple victims. Can you meet with her? Record her statement. Already on it. I will reach out today. Victoria allowed herself a moment of hope, dangerous, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this would actually work. But the universe, it seemed, was not finished testing her. 2 days before the gala, Victoria made a discovery that nearly destroyed everything. She was in Richard's office, photographing documents for Marcus, when she heard footsteps in the hallway. There was no time to escape, nowhere to hide, so she did the only thing she could. She stood perfectly still and pretended to be looking out the window. The door opened. It was not Richard. It was Alexis Monroe. The mistress stood in the doorway, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised in surprise. Mrs. Sinclair, I did not expect to find you here. Victoria turned slowly, her expression carefully neutral. I was looking for my husband's calendar. He mentioned a dinner next week that I need to plan around. His calendar is on his phone. You know that. The words were innocent enough, but the suspicion in Alexis's eyes was unmistakable. She glanced around the office, taking in the open drawers, the papers slightly out of place. What are you really doing here? Alexis asked. Victoria felt her heart pounding, but kept her voice steady. I could ask you the same question. This is my husband's private office. In my house. Alexis smiled, that sharp, dangerous smile that Victoria had come to recognize as a warning. Richard asked me to retrieve some files for the gala. Donor information, seating arrangements. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. She walked past Victoria toward the desk, close enough that Victoria could smell her perfume. Something expensive and French, probably purchased with Richard's money. You know, Alexis said, rifling through papers with deliberate casualness, I have always wondered what it must be like for you, living in this beautiful house, wearing those beautiful clothes, carrying the Sinclair air. And yet somehow, you always seem so sad. Victoria said nothing. I suppose it must be difficult, Alexis continued, knowing that your husband's attention is elsewhere, knowing that no matter how hard you try, you will never be enough for him. The cruelty was breathtaking, so casual, so confident, so utterly without shame. And in that moment, Victoria understood something important about Alexis Monroe. She was not just a mistress. She was not just an opportunist seeking wealth and status. She was a predator, a woman who derived pleasure from other people's pain, who saw Victoria's suffering as entertainment rather than tragedy. Alexis would not simply accept Richard's divorce settlement and disappear quietly. She would fight. She would scheme. She would do whatever it took to claim what she believed was rightfully hers, which meant she was far more dangerous than Victoria had realized. You should leave, Victoria said quietly, before my husband finds you in his office unsupervised. Alexis's smile faltered, just slightly, just enough to reveal the uncertainty beneath her confidence. Of course, we would not want to upset Richard. She retrieved a folder from the desk and walked toward the door. But at the threshold, she paused and looked back. You know, Mrs. Sinclair, you really should rest more. Stress is so bad for the baby. She disappeared down the hallway, leaving Victoria alone with her racing heart and the terrible certainty that Alexis Monroe suspected something. That night, Victoria called an emergency meeting. They gathered in Diane's office after hours. Victoria, Marcus, and the attorney who had become their general in this war. We may have a problem, Victoria said, and explained what had happened with Alexis. Diane listened with growing concern. If she suspects you are planning something, she could warn Richard. We need to accelerate the timeline. We cannot accelerate, Marcus countered. The technical preparations are locked in. The witnesses are scheduled. If we move too fast, something will go wrong. And if we do not move fast enough, Alexis will ruin everything before we have a chance. Victoria pressed her hands against her temples, trying to think through the fear that was clouding her judgment. What if we distract her? She asked. Both Diane and Marcus turned to look at her. Distract her how? Alexis believes she has already won. She thinks the kiss at the gala is going to be her moment of triumph. The public declaration that she has replaced me as Richard's partner. What if we let her believe that is still the plan? Diane frowned. She already believes that, but she also suspects I am up to something. So we need to give her a reason to stop suspecting. Victoria paused, an idea crystallizing in her mind. What if I make her feel sorry for me? Marcus shook his head. That woman is not capable of feeling sorry for anyone. Not sorry, Victoria corrected. Superior. What if I make her feel so confident in her victory that she stops watching me altogether? Diane leaned forward. What do you have in mind? Victoria took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I'm going to confront Richard about the affair. I'm going to cry. I'm going to beg him not to leave me. And I'm going to let Alexis see the whole thing. The silence that followed was heavy with doubt. That is incredibly risky, Diane said. If Richard suspects you know more than you are revealing, he will not suspect. Richard has spent 12 years believing I am weak, emotional, controllable. He expects me to break down when I discover his betrayal. This will confirm everything he already believes about me. She looked at Marcus, searching for understanding in his eyes. I know it sounds crazy, but I have been performing for Richard for over a decade. I know exactly what he wants to see, what he needs to believe. Trust me. Marcus held her gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I trust you, but I want to be nearby when it happens. If anything goes wrong, you will be the first person I call. The performance happened the next evening. Victoria waited until Richard came home from the office, his briefcase in hand, his expression tired but satisfied. He was in a good mood. The gala was tomorrow night, and all his plans were falling into place. Perfect timing. Richard, Victoria said, her voice trembling with carefully manufactured emotion. We need to talk. He looked up, his expression shifting from relaxation to wariness. About what? I know about her. About Alexis. The words hung in the air between them. Richard's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, calculation, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. Victoria, do not lie to me. Not again. She let the tears come. Not difficult, given everything she was feeling beneath the performance. I found messages, photographs. I know everything. Richard set down his briefcase and approached her slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of false surrender. Listen to me. Whatever you think you know, I know you're planning to leave me. I know she's going to be at the gala tomorrow. I know you're going to humiliate me in front of everyone. Her voice broke on the last word, and she saw the moment Richard decided to stop pretending. Fine, he said, his tone hardening. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Alexis. Yes, she will be at the gala. And yes, eventually, things between us are going to change. Victoria stared at him, letting the horror and devastation show on her face. How could you do this to me? To our baby? Our baby will be taken care of. You will be taken care of. But you need to understand something, Victoria. I have given you 12 years of a life you never could have achieved on your own. The house, the clothes, the status. You owe me everything. The cruelty of his words would have destroyed her once. Now they only fueled her resolve. Please, she whispered, reaching for his arm. Please do not do this. I will be better. I will be whatever you need. Just give me another chance. Richard looked at her with something approaching pity. The pity of a man watching an insect struggle beneath his heel. Get yourself together, he said coldly. Tomorrow is an important night. I need you to smile and play your part. Whatever happens after that, we will discuss like adults. He walked away, leaving her alone in the foyer. And from the shadows of the hallway, Victoria heard the soft click of heels retreating. Alexis Monroe, who had witnessed exactly what Victoria wanted her to see. A broken woman, a defeated rival. No threat whatsoever. Victoria wiped her tears and allowed herself a small, secret smile. The trap was set. Tomorrow it would spring. The morning of the gala, Victoria woke to an empty bed and a text message that changed everything. Richard had left early for a breakfast meeting, his side of the sheets cold. That was normal. What was not normal was the message waiting on her secure phone. The device Marcus had given her for communications that Richard could never trace. It was from Diane. Emergency. Come to the office now. Do not tell anyone where you are going. Victoria's stomach dropped. She dressed quickly, choosing loose clothing that concealed her pregnant belly beneath layers of fabric. The gala was in 12 hours. Whatever crisis had emerged, they had almost no time to address it. She told the housekeeper she was going to a prenatal appointment and drove to Diane's office through back roads, checking her mirrors constantly for any sign she was being followed. Marcus was already there when she arrived, his expression grim. What happened? Victoria asked, lowering herself into a chair. Diane slid a folder across the desk. We have a problem. A significant one. Victoria opened the folder and found herself staring at photographs, surveillance images of herself entering and exiting Diane's office building. There were timestamps, dates, a detailed log of every secret meeting she had attended over the past 3 months. Her blood turned to ice. Where did these come from? One of my contacts at the LAPD, Marcus said. Richard hired a private security firm 6 weeks ago to monitor your movements. He knows you have been meeting with a divorce attorney. He knows you have been spending time with me. Victoria's hands trembled as she flipped through the photographs. There she was, walking into the coffee shop in Pasadena. There she was, sitting in Marcus's car outside the grocery store. There she was, entering this very office building 3 days ago. He knows everything. Not everything, Diane said carefully. He knows you are planning to leave him. He does not appear to know about the evidence we have gathered or the plan for tonight. But he is suspicious. And a suspicious Richard Sinclair is a dangerous Richard Sinclair. Victoria pressed her hand against her belly, feeling hope kick against her palm as if sensing her mother's distress. What do we do? Marcus leaned forward. We have options. We can postpone. Wait until we have a safer opportunity to expose him. No, the word came out sharper than Victoria intended. If we postpone, he will have time to prepare. He will hide assets, destroy evidence, find ways to neutralize whatever threat he perceives. We lose everything. And if we proceed, Diane countered, we walk into a gala where Richard knows you're planning something. He will be watching you. His security will be watching you. One wrong move, and this entire operation collapses. Victoria stared at the photographs spread across the desk, evidence of her own surveillance, proof that even her secret rebellion had not gone unnoticed. For 12 years, she had been living under Richard's control. Even when she thought she was fighting back, he had been watching, tracking, preparing. The hopelessness of it threatened to overwhelm her. Then Marcus spoke. There's another option. Both women looked at him. Richard knows Victoria has been meeting with a divorce attorney. He knows she has been spending time with a man, presumably me. What he does not know is why. Diane frowned. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting we give him an explanation he will believe. One that makes him feel confident and superior. One that blinds him to the real threat. Victoria understood before he finished speaking. You want him to think we are having an affair. Marcus nodded slowly. Richard's ego is his greatest weakness. If he believes you have been sneaking around with another man, he will focus on that betrayal. He will be so consumed by rage and self-righteousness that he will not see the actual attack coming. That is insane, Diane said. You are asking Victoria to put herself in even greater danger. I am asking Victoria to use Richard's arrogance against him. Marcus looked at her, his eyes steady. But it is your choice. It has always been your choice. Victoria sat in silence, weighing the risks against the possibilities. If Richard believed she was having an affair, his fury would be volcanic. He might retaliate. He might hurt her, but he would also be distracted, emotional, off balance. And that might be exactly the opening they needed. How do we make her believe it? She asked. The plan came together in the space of 2 hours. Marcus would arrive at the gala as Victoria's guest, ostensibly a business contact, but positioned close enough to fuel Richard's suspicions. Victoria would be attentive to him, just slightly more than appropriate. She would let Richard see lingering glances, casual touches, the kind of intimacy that suggested something deeper. Richard would notice. Richard always noticed. His attention would fix on a perceived affair, leaving him blind to the evidence being loaded onto the presentation system, the witnesses positioned throughout the ballroom, the federal agents waiting outside. By the time he realized the true nature of the threat, it would be too late. This could work, Diane admitted reluctantly, but it requires perfect execution. One mistake, and Richard will retaliate before you can expose him. Then we will not make mistakes, Victoria said. She looked at Marcus, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of what they were about to do, the risks they were about to take. I need to talk to Marcus alone, she said quietly. Diane nodded and left the office, closing the door behind her. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the coming hours pressing down on them. You do not have to do this, Marcus said finally. Any of it. If you want to walk away, disappear, start over somewhere, Richard will never find you. I can make that happen. Victoria shook her head. I spent 12 years running, hiding, making myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared entirely. I cannot do that anymore. Not for me, and not for Hope. Hope. Victoria touched her belly, a soft smile crossing her face despite everything. My daughter. That is what I'm going to name her. Hope. Marcus's expression softened with something that looked almost like wonder. It is a beautiful name. It is a promise that her life will be different from mine, that she will grow up knowing what courage looks like, what truth looks like, what it means to stand up for yourself, even when everyone tells you it is impossible. She paused, her throat tightening with emotion. I am terrified, Marcus. I am terrified that something will go wrong tonight, that Richard will destroy me before I can destroy him. But I am more terrified of what happens if I do nothing, if I let him win, if I teach my daughter that powerful men are unstoppable and women like us should just accept our fate. Marcus reached across the space between them and took her hands in his. You are not going to fail, and you are not going to face this alone. His touch was warm, grounding, steadying. Victoria found herself leaning toward him, drawn by a gravity she had been resisting for weeks. Marcus, I know, he said quietly. I know this is not the time. I know there's too much at stake to complicate things with feelings that might not survive what is coming. He paused, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. But I need you to know something. Whatever happens tonight, whatever comes after, you have changed me. Watching you fight, watching you refuse to give up despite everything working against you. It has reminded me why I do this work, why any of it matters. Victoria felt tears pressing against her eyes. When this is over, she whispered, when Richard is gone and I am free. When this is over, we will figure out the rest. Together. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss against her knuckles. It was a promise, a hope, a reason to survive whatever was coming. Victoria returned home to find the house in chaos. Staff members rushed through the halls, preparing for the gala. Florists delivered arrangements. Caterers confirmed final details. And in the center of it all, Richard stood in his private study, speaking on the phone with the intensity that made Victoria's skin prickle with warning. She paused outside the door, just out of sight, and listened. "I do not care what it takes," Richard was saying. "I want eyes on her every moment tonight. If she so much as looks at another man wrong, I want to know about it." A pause. "No, we proceed as planned. Alexis is ready. The moment is set. And if my dear wife tries anything at all, we handle it quietly. Do you understand?" Another pause. "Good. Tonight, everything changes." He ended the call, and Victoria heard his footsteps approaching the door. She moved quickly, positioning herself at the end of the hallway as if she had just arrived. "Victoria." Richard emerged from the study, his expression shifting from cold calculation to warm concern with disturbing speed. "How was your appointment?" "Fine. The doctor says the baby is healthy." "Excellent. And you? Are you feeling well enough for tonight?" The solicitousness in his voice was nauseating. "I will manage." "Good, good." He approached her, placing his hands on her shoulders with a gentleness that felt like a threat. "Tonight is important, Victoria. For both of us. I need you by my side, smiling, supportive. Can you do that for me?" She looked into his eyes, the eyes of a man who had beaten her, betrayed her, and was now planning something that made her blood run cold. "Of course," she said. "I am your wife." Richard smiled, satisfied. "That is my girl." He kissed her forehead and walked away, already focused on the next item on his agenda. Victoria stood in the hallway, her heart racing, her mind spinning with the implications of what she had overheard. Richard was not just suspicious. He was preparing. He had his own plan for tonight, and whatever it was, it involved Alexis and something that would change everything. Victoria pulled out her secure phone and sent a message to Marcus. "Richard is planning something. He mentioned Alexis. Said tonight, everything changes. We may be walking into a trap." The response came within seconds. "Then we spring ours first. Stay calm. Stay ready. I will be there." Victoria deleted the messages and returned the phone to its hiding place. In 8 hours, everything she had worked for would either succeed or collapse. In 8 hours, she would either be free or destroyed. There was no middle ground. The Grand Monarch Hotel ballroom glittered like a jewel box designed to contain monsters. Victoria arrived at 7 o'clock precisely, her emerald gown flowing around her pregnant belly, her diamond necklace catching the light with every breath. She had spent 2 hours in hair and makeup, transforming herself into the image of the perfect society wife. Beautiful, composed, utterly unsuspecting. It was her greatest performance yet. Richard was already working the room when she entered, shaking hands with senators, laughing with hedge fund managers, accepting congratulations for the philanthropic award he would receive later that evening. He looked handsome in his tailored tuxedo, every silver hair in place, every gesture calculated to project power and charm. He was a predator dressed as a prince. And tonight, Victoria was going to unmask him. She scanned the ballroom, searching for the faces she needed to see. Marcus was positioned near the bar, dressed in a simple black suit that made him look like any other guest. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was in place. Sarah Whitfield sat at a table near the back, her presence arranged through Diane's connections. The widow of the man Richard had destroyed was dressed in simple black, her expression a mask of controlled grief and determination. The technical team had confirmed that the evidence was loaded and ready. Federal agents were stationed outside, waiting for the signal. 3 journalists Marcus trusted had been given exclusive access to the story. All Victoria had to do was wait for the right moment. But the right moment, she would soon learn, was not hers to choose. The kiss happened at 8:45. Victoria was standing near the champagne fountain, making small talk with the wife of a city councilman, when she saw Alexis Monroe approaching Richard with the confidence of a woman who believed she had already won. Alexis was stunning in a red dress that left little to the imagination, her dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, her lips curved in a smile that promised everything and apologized for nothing. She walked directly up to Richard in the center of the ballroom, placed her hand on his chest, and kissed him. Not a quick peck, not an accidental brush of lips. A full, passionate, deliberate kiss that lasted 7 seconds and announced to everyone in the room exactly what she was to him. The ballroom went silent. 300 faces turned toward the spectacle, mouths agape, champagne forgotten. Victoria could feel the weight of their stares, the pity, the schadenfreude, the hungry anticipation of witnessing a powerful woman brought low. This was the moment Alexis had been planning. The public humiliation, the declaration of victory, the claiming of a prize she believed was rightfully hers. And it was exactly what Victoria had been waiting for. She set down her sparkling water with deliberate calm. She smoothed the front of her emerald gown. She touched her pregnant belly, the signal Marcus was watching for. Across the room, 3 people began to move. Richard finally pulled away from Alexis, his expression a mixture of arousal and alarm. His eyes found Victoria through the crowd, and for the first time all evening, genuine fear flickered behind his confidence. Good. He should be afraid. But then something went wrong. Victoria was walking toward the stage, ready to begin her speech, when Richard intercepted her. His hand closed around her arm with bruising force, his smile never wavering for the cameras still watching. "I know what you were planning," he hissed under his breath. "Did you really think I would not find out?" Victoria's heart stopped. "Richard, the meetings with the attorney, the private investigator, the evidence you think you have gathered." His grip tightened. "I have spent the last week preparing for this moment, Victoria. Whatever you were planning to expose, it ends now." He pulled her toward a service corridor, away from the crowd, away from Marcus, away from everyone who might have helped her. "Security has been instructed to remove your little friends the moment they try anything. The technical booth has been locked down, and the federal agents outside." He laughed softly. "They have been given a very convincing tip about a bomb threat at the convention center across town. By the time they realize it was a false alarm, this gala will be over, and you will be on your way to a very private facility where doctors can monitor your mental health." Victoria felt the world tilting beneath her feet. He had anticipated everything, countered everything. She had walked into his trap, thinking she was setting her own. "You cannot do this," she whispered. "I could do anything I want. I always have." Richard's smile was cruel. "Did you really think a woman like you could outsmart a man like me? You are nothing, Victoria. You have always been nothing. And after tonight, everyone will know it." He shoved her into a small storage room and closed the door behind them. They were alone, and Victoria had never been more afraid in her life. Richard paced the small room like a caged animal, his composure finally cracking. 12 years I gave you. 12 years of luxury, status, everything a woman could want. And this is how you repay me? By trying to destroy me?" Victoria pressed herself against the wall, one hand protecting her belly. "You destroyed yourself, Richard. I just found the evidence. Evidence that will never see the light of day. Evidence that is being erased from the system as we speak." He laughed. "Did you think I would leave anything to chance? I own this city. I own the people in that ballroom. I own you." Something shifted inside Victoria. For 12 years, she had believed him. She had believed she was powerless, worthless, trapped. She had believed that survival meant submission and safety meant silence. But she was done believing his lies. "You do not own me," she said, her voice steady despite her terror. "You never did. I let you control me because I was afraid, but fear is not ownership. And tonight, Richard, I am not afraid anymore." She reached into the hidden pocket of her gown, a modification she had made specifically for this possibility, and pulled out her secure phone. Richard's eyes widened. "What are you?" "This phone has been recording since the moment you grabbed my arm. Every word you've said is being transmitted to a server that you cannot access, cannot erase, and cannot control." She held up the device, letting him see the recording indicator blinking red. "Your confession about the bomb threat hoax. Your admission that you knew about the evidence and tried to suppress it. Your threat to have me committed. Victoria Smaid. You just handed me everything I need to destroy you, Richard. And you did it because you could not resist gloating." For the first time in 12 years, Victoria watched her husband's confidence shatter completely. The door burst open. Marcus stood in the doorway, 2 security guards behind him. Not Richard's men, but federal agents who had never left for any bomb threat. "The tip was a test," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on Richard. "We wanted to see if you would take the bait." "You did." Richard lunged for Victoria, but Marcus was faster. He intercepted the attack, pinning Richard against the wall with the efficiency of a man who had spent years in the FBI. Richard Sinclair, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, fraud, and witness tampering. You have the right to remain silent. Richard struggled against the grip, his face purple with rage. You cannot do this. Do you know who I am? We know exactly who you are, Marcus said calmly. And so will everyone else. They returned to the ballroom together. Victoria, Marcus, and the agents escorting a handcuffed Richard Sinclair. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, gasps and murmurs rippling through the assembled guests. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. The scandal that would dominate headlines for months was unfolding in real time. Alexis Monroe stood frozen, near the champagne fountain, her triumphant smile long gone, replaced by the dawning horror of a woman who had bet everything on the wrong horse. Victoria walked past her without a word. She did not need to say anything. The sight of Richard in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him, said everything that needed to be said. Victoria climbed onto the stage and took the microphone. The ballroom fell silent. "Good evening," she said, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Victoria Sinclair, and I have a story to tell." She told him everything. The abuse, the fraud, the murder of Thomas Whitfield, the mistress who had been promised a throne built on blood and lies. She introduced Sarah Whitfield, who stood and spoke of her husband with tears streaming down her face. She displayed the evidence on the giant screens, documents, photographs, wire transfers that proved beyond doubt what Richard Sinclair really was. When she finished, the ballroom was silent. Then someone began to clap. It was a single person at first, Sarah Whitfield, rising from her chair with tears of vindication streaming down her face. Then another person joined, and another, and another. Within moments, the entire ballroom was on its feet, applauding the woman they had thought was broken, celebrating the destruction of the man they had once admired. Victoria stood on that stage, her pregnant belly prominent beneath her emerald gown, and allowed herself to feel something she had not experienced in 12 years. Victory. 6 months later, Victoria sat on the porch of her new home, a modest farmhouse in Northern California, far from the glitter and poison of her old life. Hope was 3 months old now, a beautiful baby girl with her mother's dark eyes and a laugh that could heal any wound. She slept peacefully in a bassinet beside Victoria, her tiny fingers curled around a soft blanket. Marcus arrived at sunset, as he did every evening. He had moved to a nearby town after the trial, opening a small private investigation firm that specialized in helping women escape dangerous situations. He never pushed Victoria for more than she was ready to give. He simply showed up, day after day, proving through actions what Richard had never understood about love. It was patient. It was kind. It did not demand or control. "How was your day?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Quiet. Perfect. Victoria smiled. Hope smiled at me for the first time this morning. A real smile, not just gas." Marcus laughed, reaching over to gently touch the baby's cheek. "She's going to be just like her mother. Strong, brave, unstoppable." Victoria leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Richard had been sentenced to 42 years in federal prison. Alexis Monroe had fled the country, her reputation destroyed, her dreams of wealth and status evaporated. The Sinclair empire had been dismantled, its assets distributed to victims and charities, its legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the price of unchecked power. And Victoria, the woman everyone had underestimated, dismissed, and tried to break, had emerged from the wreckage not as a victim, but as a survivor. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked quietly. "Any of it?" Victoria considered the question, watching the sun sink below the hills in streaks of gold and crimson. "I regret the years I wasted being afraid. I regret believing I was powerless when I was strong enough to fight all along." She paused, touching Hope's sleeping face. "But I do not regret the path that brought me here, to this place, to this life, to you." Marcus pressed a kiss to her temple. "I love you, Victoria. I love you too." Hope stirred in her bassinet, her tiny mouth curving into something that looked remarkably like contentment. And as the stars appeared one by one above their little farmhouse, Victoria finally understood what freedom really meant. It was not the absence of pain or the guarantee of safety. It was the courage to choose your own path, the strength to stand up when the world pushed you down, and the wisdom To know that the darkest nights always gave way to dawn. She had walked through fire and emerged not burned, but forged. And that was more than enough.